Today I'm going to be reacting to a video that came out about 5 minutes ago, and it blew my mind. It really did. It just poofed my mind when I saw it, because I thought, wow, I did not think that this would be a topic of conversation, let alone on YouTube, let alone on Jubilee. But of course, Jubilee is providing me with a lot of content at the moment, and I'm going to capitalize on that because I have a soul about the size of Jubilee's. So this video is titled, "Should White People Adopt People of Color?" Ooh. Okay, a little bit about me if you don't know. When I was born to a South African prostitute, had an older brother. He's about 3 to 4 years older than me. Long story short, we were abandoned by our mother. I was then fostered and then eventually adopted by a white South African family. As a result, I was separated from my brother. The last time I saw my brother was when I was about 9-10 years old. When we saw each other for the last time, we actually couldn't speak to each other because we spoke different languages. I spoke only English and a Dutch sort of subsection of Dutch, which is Afrikaans, spoken commonly amongst Dutch South Africans. He spoke my native tongue, which I don't speak, called Zulu or isiZulu. I haven't seen him since because we were both born with, or at least both considered to be born with, alcohol fetal syndrome. He is severely brain damaged. I don't know if he is still alive, but I do know that our lives were very different. So I do expect that my opinion won't necessarily change about interracial adoption. I would be very interested in seeing what this is about. And yeah, let's get into it.
I have used microaggressions against my own race.
I hated being Asian growing up. I despised it. I just remember making the crudest, most horrible jokes because in some way I felt like this was expected of me to make everyone feel comfortable about my adoption.
What is the experience like for transracial adoptees in America? We partnered with Lionsgate on their upcoming film Joyride to hear the stories of real-life adoptees and how their experiences shaped their lives.
Okay, so obviously this is only about America because on the internet, as we know, everything is about America. Nothing else happens anywhere else in the world. And so, yes, I am going to be considering this from a non-American perspective, just for some variety, just, you know, so that we can marinate some different, diverse experiences, because I'm so sorry, but, you know, there are things like this happening everywhere in the world, and I do think that it can get a bit insular as a result, but I do understand that this is going to be from a very American perspective, so just keep that in mind.
Adopted kids are more screwed up than biological kids. 3, 2, 1, go.
I'm really curious about you two first.
Yeah.
I know so many biological kids that are screwed up. And they were raised in like a healthy, nuclear, cliche, white picket fence family. And I know several adopted kids that are so successful, that are doing great. Shout out Simone Biles. She went to the Olympics and she was adopted.
Can I move? Like, she changed my mind a bit. Like,
come on!
Can I?
I'm like, she has a point there. I can't.
No, I can strongly disagree with that.
No, because like, the thing is, she changed my mind on that because like, as a foster kid, like somebody who went through all that, feeling neglected from like the foster parents, but I don't let my past define who I am to make me screwed up.
Yeah, so I'm on strongly agree because I've been through a few therapeutic boarding schools. One of them, I remember the place where wealthy parents send their children. Even with all that privilege, everybody there was messed up, weren't stable. Whether it was a drug addiction or just like bad temper or violence, adoptees all carry this trauma. We don't even have a birthday. And me personally, going through that and growing up in a colorblind environment, I think any children that have to fend for themselves are gonna go through some messed up shit.
Yeah, the not having a birthday thing is really weird. 2 things. Firstly, I think that when it comes to adoptees being more screwed up than biological children, This all has to do with the parents. Literally all it is. All about parents and how parents approach adoption. There is no universal blueprint for how that's meant to be, for how it's meant to look, for how effectively you can do that. I think it is going to really depend on the commitment of the parents and their commitment to putting their child before themselves. This is going to be hard, especially if my former or my adoptive parent comes across this. I mean, we haven't seen each other in like nearly a decade now. They put themselves before me all the time. It was all about them and their well-being, and that really messed me up, because they would always say, whenever other people were confused about something, whenever other people had questions, they would repeat this line that just makes me cringe whenever I hear it. This child is as if born unto you. They would continually tell me this whenever they would tell me to be grateful for the fact that I had been saved by them, whenever they would say things because they have severe, and I mean severe, bipolar, and as I said, were suicidal, attempted suicide, in which I was left a letter. I was then subsequently blamed for the fact that I had not acted as soon as I should have by another family member. Based on what I've seen, the majority of parents who adopt are not doing it for the child, they're doing it for themselves. When it comes to a child who is going to have questions about just what they see around them, you need to prioritize their well-being and their feelings over that of yours. It feels good as a parent to tell your adopted child who doesn't look like you, you are my child. We don't look the same, but you are mine. You are mine. You belong to me. You are as if born unto me. The law says that you are mine. You essentially came out of me, even though that makes no sense. That makes the child feel like their feelings of difference, their feelings of not understanding are completely illogical, that they're doing something wrong. It screws them up. It means that they don't have any questions answered. It just means that their entire personhood is essentially invalidated in order to make the parent feel like they are a true parent. And I don't think that race should come before the ability to give a child a better life than they would otherwise have.
But yeah.
So, thank you for sharing, by the way. I look at this question through two lenses. The adopted community as a whole is 4 times more at risk of suicide than non-adopted counterparts. I think that adopted kids are more at risk for struggle because of society and because of the dominant narrative of white saviorism that is all surrounding adoption. We all know this narrative, but the narrative for those that don't know is this notion.
White saviorism refers to those who work from the assumption that they know best what racial groups need. They believe it's their responsibility to support and uplift communities of color in their own country or somewhere else, because people of color lack the resources, willpower, and intelligence to do it themselves. When I say this, people are going to be like, oh, the only reason she's saying this is because she was adopted by white people and therefore she's got internalized self-hatred and internalized racism against black people and da-da-da-da-da, and she's just like stooped in the source of the system and of systemic racism, and oh my gosh, critical race theory. You can think what you want, but here's the truth, okay? Saviorism isn't a white people thing, okay? This is a thing that every single group of people has, okay? The amount of black people in South Africa who believed that they could save me from the fact that I had been adopted by white people, extraordinary. Of course, it didn't come in as affectionate a tone as it did with sort of this connotation of white saviorism. It was more so, white people have fucked you up and you're bringing shame to black people, so we need to basically try and put the black back into you, okay? I get it online all the time, especially from BreadTube and especially from black creators in BreadTube who believe that they can save me from my internalized self-hatred. Let's just stop blaming white people for everything, because it gets us nowhere. And what's going to happen is when white people are inevitably, as is happening now, at the bottom of the food chain, who are you going to blame? You're going to have to start blaming Chinese people, Japanese people, South Korean people. That's not going to look too good on the resume of, like, you know, racial equality. I'm sorry, we can't keep blaming these concepts with the prefix of white for everything, because we're not solving anything and we're not actually looking at the complexity and the essence of these things. I don't think saviorism is just a white people thing. I think just because, for instance, in my life, it is definitely an example of something that was there, it doesn't mean that that's a universal. And I think we need to also establish context with it. In South Africa, it was just post-apartheid South Africa. And firstly, Black South Africans, hardly any education relative to the white South African population. Interracial adoption had not been a thing. I think I was probably one of the first, like 10 Black South Africans fostered and then adopted by a white South African, a completely new thing. There inevitably was sort of a sentiment of being a savior. I think that Black left tube and the generic left tube's attempts to save me came from a place of selfishness, but in the majority of cases, from a place of good intentions. So I don't necessarily think that it is as malicious as it comes across. One more thing. I find this annoying as well, and this has also perplexed me and confused me a lot. It wasn't Black people who wanted to foster me. It wasn't Black people who wanted to adopt me, ever. They didn't want anything to do with me because I was the child of a whore and an alcoholic and a brain damaged woman. I didn't have parents in wedlock. I was an abandoned bastard of a child. They didn't want to do with me. It was white people who did. They're being branded as white saviors because they're doing something that other people wouldn't want to do. And I find this so much also with just leftist politics in general. It's so funny how there's so much in common here. But I find it as well, you know, when left people say, like, you know, we need to be nicer to immigrants or what have you, or we need to be welcoming to immigrants. And then you say, okay, well, like, they're going to live, like, in your backyard. And like, whoa, no. You know, the saviors can't actually win because if they're doing the saving, if they're doing, like, you know, the righteous thing or the moral thing, they're somehow doing something bad according to this concept, according to this kind of critical theorizing. And that's, I don't know, it makes me feel weird. It just makes me feel so weird. But yeah, also what he said about suicide, yes, so true, so true. Yeah.
Of adoptees should feel lucky. Adoptees must be grateful. And gratitude is related to this idea of repayment. The effect of that is that we as adoptees, as a whole community, feel like we're less worth than our non-adopted counterparts. It makes us feel like you should repay your life that you were given. You should repay the fortunes that were given to you. And for little kids, how can we repay something that's immeasurable?
That is so true. I was told constantly to be grateful, that I must be grateful. There was this expectation. I have such problems getting angry. Like, I can't get angry. And it's a real issue with me because I don't really know where that emotion is meant to go. I don't have an outlet for it. Because as a kid, I wasn't allowed to get angry and I couldn't get angry. It wasn't something that I did as somebody who ought to be grateful for what had been given to me. As a result, I always had to be good. I always had to be grateful. If I was bad, it was because I was stupid. I was called every name under the sun. My adoptive parent has severe bipolar. Their mood would just switch like that. 1 minute they would be affectionate, and then in a second after I just like sneezed or something and that annoyed them, they would just completely flip out insane. Every month they would have to change their medication because of this. I did not know what mood I was going to get. And it was very weird having to be grateful to a parent who was so ill, who was in and out of mental health institutions, who was constantly suicidal. This person didn't get out of bed like ever. Like, they didn't work, they didn't like go into society or anything like that. They never had a job, at least since I knew them. And they were always in bed, always asleep, but otherwise didn't do anything. It was so rare when they did actually get up. Like, it was a huge event when that happened because they were just so ill. It was difficult being and having to feel grateful for somebody who couldn't actually even look after themselves, who was being looked after by health care people, or mainly by their own mother, who raised me, in fact, for a lot of my young childhood. So it was very, very peculiar. And so I definitely get that.
And it's not fair for us as little kids to have that weight, that burden on us while growing up. And because we have that weight, because we have that burden, that's what, so to speak, messes us up.
You're bringing back some stuff. I'm like,
Yeah.
like, Jesus.
I chose to be on this side because I felt if I was on that side, it'd be denying my experience as an adoptee, the fear of abandonment that feels inherent to being an adoptee. Because of that, I have definitely been in relationships I shouldn't have been in, toxic ones, and relationships for way too long. What comes with that then is like feeling like you have to prove that you're worthy of love constantly because of the inner voids and wounds of being abandoned as a baby, or just abandoned in general.
Yeah, she is so right about that. She is so right about that sense of abandonment issues. This is why so many of all my relationships have not worked. The thing with all of my relationships that I've had in common, and I actually, like, I haven't been in a relationship for years now, okay? Incel. The thing that they all have in common is that I never get angry with them. I'm incredibly submissive and I'm incredibly grateful, and I will do anything for them, anything. I will be so nice. I have absolutely no self-respect in any of my relationships that I'm in. That is the essence of all of my relationships. And I always get dumped. Always. I am always the one who gets dumped. And this is the thing. This is the thing that stems from all of my, I think just all of my experiences having been adopted and fostered. It's just that sense of you have to always be grateful. A fear, a constant fear of rejection and abandonment, a constant fear of letting somebody down or showing them that you are not grateful for them showing you the bare minimum. Ultimately, in my case, always expecting that you are going to inevitably be rejected because you are not good enough. Either you're not good enough racially, you're black, or you're not good enough because you're adopted or whatnot, or they're just going to reject you because they're going to realize how much of an absolute fraud you are. I think that that's always the kind of baggage that I bring into a relationship. And that baggage I try to hide with being overly nice, always taking the blame for everything. Ultimately, just putting myself into situations, which I think is why now I am so averse to being in a relationship, because I am the perfect person. I would be the perfect person to be in an abusive relationship. I have been, but not like a physically abusive one, and that is my ultimate fear. I am the perfect candidate for that, because I would stay and endure. I would stay and I would be in that kind of relationship. I would be grateful, and I think that is one thing that I'm petrified of. I'm really scared of that prospect and of that happening. Crazy.
Yeah.
Those wounds cut
Felt
deep.
that.
Yeah. Hi, my name is Matea. I am adopted from China in the 90s during the one-child policy. So one thing I'm super grateful about with my parents is they really valued making sure that my brother and I experienced our heritage. Every summer, we would go to this camp that specifically focused on our Chinese heritage and taught us different aspects of it. So like language, calligraphy, dance, martial arts. And so that was a really special and I think important experience to have.
That is what you call selfless parents. That is when parents don't try and impose a completely different culture, completely different race, a completely f***ed up view of your identity onto you. and don't answer your questions and ignore the fact that you are actually not theirs. Even though legally the child is yours, they are not yours. I think this is something that all parents actually have a problem with to some extent, realizing that their child is not theirs, like not their possession, not their object, but is actually an autonomous person. Adoptive parents especially have this problem. I was never exposed to like my culture, my language, nothing. I mean, my hair, one of the reasons why I have fake hair is because I don't actually know how to properly look after my natural hair because I wasn't taught how to do that. My natural hair when I was a youngin was always in clumps of like knots. There was no sort of culture around looking after myself. When I was in primary school, people used to call me chalk-skinned because I didn't moisturize or anything. And these were only things that I started to learn when I moved to the UK. I finally had the internet for the first time in my life. Learned about these things when I went to sixth form. I felt so ashamed of my natural hair because it was just in tatters and everything. So I just wrapped it up in a headscarf and never ever showed my hair. And then it was only once I sort of got money, got a job and all these sorts of things that I then started investing in my looks and cosmetics and, you know, the whole story. But these are things that I had to sort of acquire on my own. What's awful also is that people like notice these things. They sort of notice that you're not really like black. They say that I am not actually black, that I bring shame to black people. You know, all these different things. You, but people know that they are adopted, that they are quote unquote frauds. They get called out for it. People say things, but I get you. I get you, Mattia. I get you.
As a transracial adoptee.
Hi, my name is Eli. I'm 23 years old and I was adopted from South Korea at 9 months old. I have 4 adopted siblings, also from Korea, and I grew up in Denver, Colorado, so not a lot of diversity there. And I'm actually about to go look for my birth parents this fall.
That's actually quite cool. Having a sibling, even if they're of a different race, that can help so much. In South Africa, I sort of crossed paths with another girl who had the exact same name as me. She was adopted into this like really like rich white South African family. Oh yeah, note to people, just because people are white doesn't mean that they're rich. South Africa is a perfect example of this. I lived with South Africans, poor white South Africans. So, you know, it is a different, white people are not a monolith, okay? Like, let's give them back their humanity. Okay, I knew this girl who had the same name as me and she had a sibling who was also adopted and there were 2 of them. And I always thought, gosh, I wish I had somebody who I could relate to with this. It was just me. I was so lonely. My friends were basically old, incredibly religious white women. The social highlight of my week was going to church on a Sunday, baby. Yes, with woman over the age of 60, going into hysterics, speaking in tongues, having fits for the Lord. We love that religious vibe. Oh my gosh.
Transracial adoption should not be allowed. 3, 2, 1, go.
I mean, I think it makes sense.
Yeah.
We're all transracial adoptees. That would be saying that you would be against your own adoption. And I think I just want to add also, it's different from being colorblind. That's not why I'm here, just to clarify.
Okay, theoretically, let's say we were on agree for one reason. Do you guys have any gripes against transracial adoption?
Well, yeah, like I guess like what I just said a little bit.
Savior complex.
Savior complex?
Opening up your kids to the culture that they came from.
Yeah, no, you really spoke to something. All my friends that are black or Arabic have all this culture that they grew up with and they like years and years of like learning stuff. That's what I missed out on. For the future generations and people who are adopting right now, I think the biggest thing would be to stop being colorblind because we're not helping the kids.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I agree that everybody deserves a set of parents, family. Everybody deserves to be loved and nurtured and cared for. However, the recent legislation that almost didn't pass, I guess, for ICWA, which is the Indigenous Child Welfare Act, being Native American, and not adopted by Native Americans. I don't know anything. You know, there's so much about my life that just didn't make sense until I went out and learned it myself. So I feel like that small community of Native children need to stay with other Natives. It doesn't have to be the same tribe. Keep them Native because, you know, our population's declining.
I mean, I am standing here where I am, but I do think it is a little bit of a privileged place to be standing because I think the reality of adoption in the US and culture in the US is that it's very hard to be a person of color here in this country. You know, my parents were white. My parents being white will never understand what it's like to be a person of color in the US. And they're not going to be able to connect with me in that way, which is kind of a big deal. Now, there are other things that they do really, really well, but the reality is living here is kind of tough for a person of color, and they can recognize that for me, but they can't know what my experience is.
I do agree with him based on personal experience as well. My white adoptive and foster parents can never know what it is like to be a black person navigating the world. Other black people who are allegedly like my brethren, my tribe, my people, do not know what it is like to be a black person navigating the world through the lens of living as a transracially adopted person. Their inability to empathize with that can be just as harmful and just as detrimental as the former. And it has been. It really has been. And it isn't that I have like self-hate. It isn't that I hate black people. It's that I have found it incredibly difficult to be accepted by black South Africans, by black British people as well, by African Americans, because of the fact that I am seen as being whitewashed. And that's okay. That's fine. It's just, it hurts me so much more when black people say to me that I'm not really black or that I've got internalized hate than it does when like a white person says something like weird to me. I can't win. Whereas when it's like somebody who is white, who doesn't look like me at all, who like says like, oh my gosh, like you're not white or you're not whatever, it's like, oh, okay. It doesn't get into my muscles and my bones and my tissue as much. Stuff transracial adoptees here growing up. Oh my gosh. I have some crazy stories for you. Oh, baby.
To you as a transracial adoptee.
Okay, who are your parents? Because my parents are white, so they never know where they are in the crowd.
Do you know your real parents though?
What country are you originally from?
Oh yeah, where are you from?
I just get made fun of being adopted, so I would say my parents chose me. Yours just stuck with what they got.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh, this is a crazy thing. Damn, kids are horrible, okay? Kids are absolutely horrible. You know, I'm all for protecting kids against everything and everyone. I'm all for whenever there is some kind of disaster, kids come first. Kids, pregnant woman, the elderly, before everybody else. Like, you know, I'm all for that, okay? I come last on the pecking order of most things, okay? And I'm fine with that. But holy shite, kids are horrible little shites, okay? I was really good at sport. The one reason why I was able to go to school in South Africa, which is a country where you have to pay for all education, private, public, all of it, was because I got scholarships for sport. But I played soccer. Because it wasn't too common for girls to play soccer, I played primarily with the boys. These boys were horrible. There was this one boy who started this rumor, which was ultimately the reason why I eventually just stopped playing football or soccer altogether. He started this rumor because one day my adoptive parents was actually able to come to a football meet that I had. They saw that I was with this person who was white. And they started a rumor. I now know that it was like, they were saying that I was basically in a lesbian relationship with this person, that I was in a, like this lesbian relationship with this adoptive mother, and that I was therefore like a little, I don't know, like a little slave or something like that. And it was big news. It was huge. And whenever I would go like to like kick the ball or whatever and just playing football. They would like make the sound like these like gross sexual sounds. They also wouldn't touch me because, you know, they didn't want to catch anything. Oh, it was, yeah, they were cool little boys, okay? Cool, horrible little boys. Another funny thing, well, this one was actually funny because I wasn't like informed about sort of being adopted or anything. I was told that I believe that somebody had said that I was a doctor when they tried to explain to somebody else about why I was with a white person, and I thought that they said that I was a doctor, and so I believed that I was a doctor for like ages, and I was like, I'm a doctor. So that was one thing. Constantly told to be grateful, that I must be so grateful and so happy, especially by the family themselves, who just were absolutely like repulsed by me. To an extent, I get it. I don't like get it as in justifying it, but I get it from the context in which the majority of this family had actually come from Zimbabwe after Robert Mugabe essentially kicked them out, and they were very rich in Zimbabwe, got kicked out in the late 90s, ended up in South Africa with no money. They'd lost everything. Like they lost like their home, their money, their everything. I don't think that it's justifiable or right, but I do get it insofar as trying to like explain why they felt that way toward me, why they didn't like me, why they had to treat me any differently to how they would treat their servants, basically. So there you go.
You're so lucky. Congrats. Oh, that was a big one. People would literally be like, congratulations.
I know, oh my gosh, that's the worst one. The congratulations, the you should be so grateful. And this would happen so much with me, especially when I was at that point in my life, when I was just being fostered by different people, especially by teachers at my high school. Oh my gosh, this thing, like, oh my gosh, the gratitude, the congratulations. I was eventually rejected. The worst instance for me was when I was being fostered by a teacher of mine who had a biological daughter who was white. They were white, and I was essentially going to be like readopted by her. I was going to live with her legally and permanently. At this point, my actual adoptive parents had already moved to the UK to stay in a mental health facility and an institution here. Hadn't seen her for over like about 2 years or so, like she'd already left. And so I was just sort of like living like in limbo in South Africa alone in boarding school during the holidays with this teacher. At the last minute, she decided that her biological daughter was her priority. Just shattered my entire sort of like idea of finding a family or like being loved for me, because from that moment onward, I always knew that I was different, and that being adopted or fostered always made you different by default. You were not going to be as desired or as loved as a biological child. I can't project that onto other people, but that is just how I feel about these situations and about adoption. I think it's like when you're told to be grateful for that, and when people are like, oh, congratulations, especially when I came to the UK, oh my gosh, wow, you got out of Africa, oh, congratulations. Oh dear, what a world.
What?
Are your parents coming to the parent meeting conference? They never came. Or are they coming to your football game? They never came.
Bruh. Oh, that feeling. To be fair, like in South Africa, we didn't have exams or anything, so there weren't any of those meetings. So, you know, it wasn't like an important thing. And I was at boarding school, so there wasn't like, you know, it was fine. That was why I loved boarding school. I thrived at boarding school. I'm not even kidding. I'm sorry. I just need to, let me just go back into, I thrived at boarding school because no parents, nobody had parents. You were just kids on your own. There wasn't the influence of the outside world. We didn't have internet, we didn't have TV. So none of the racial politics, none of the identity politics got in. We were just kids working with our own devices, our own hierarchies, our own stupidity, our own naivete. And it was beautiful most of the time. We became each other's parents and siblings and family. We had to make it work. We had to live together. And I have never been happier in my life than when I was at boarding school. That was my era. That was when I peaked. I peaked for those 2 years. That was my peak. It's been downhill since then.
I have used microaggressions against my own race. Oof. 3, 2, 1, go.
I think when I was younger, there was definitely some jokes that I made, which I deeply regret, but trust me, I'm picking up the slack now. But I think it also the fact that I was growing up countryside in like a predominantly white place made it so that like I accepted a lot of things, little comments or little jokes that I would just let slide, or people using the N-word. And I think when I started learning more about Black culture, that's when I was like, okay, that's really not okay, and this is why. But I think that also comes with maturity and age.
This is a tricky one for me. I would definitely be on agree. I'd be on strongly agree. I was essentially told I was not like other Black people. I was not like other Black South Africans. And based on just how I lived, it confirmed to me that I wasn't like other Black people, that I was special relative to other Black people. The only person I ever really loved, I call her my adoptive grandmother. She was an absolutely crazy lady and incredibly devout and religious. She believes that I had been saved from just the squalor and savagery of Blackness in South Africa, from a mother and a father who were both brain damaged, who were both alcoholics, who had no education, no formal education whatsoever, could hardly like speak full coherent sentences. I was living with them. I was diagnosed with fetal alcohol syndrome. I was deemed incapable of even being able to talk or go to school until I eventually went to school when I was about 8 or 9. A lot of things for me confirmed this idea that I was different to other Black people, because other Black people were servants, were maids, didn't go to school. Other Black people didn't play tennis for the South African tennis team when they were young. I did, because I was quite good at tennis, at least in South African standards. Other Black people didn't like swim. That was a huge thing. Black people didn't swim, and I swam in all of my school teams. I was in the A team for all the sports that I played. Other Black people weren't, especially in the sports that were incredibly like just white dominated, because you had to have money to play them typically, or you had to be really good at them so that your school would fund you to play them, which is what happened with me. It was weird because my circumstance and my situation kept telling me that I wasn't Black, that I wasn't like other Black people, that I wasn't like other Black South Africans. And because I couldn't speak my native tongue, for me, yeah, I wasn't Black. And Black people would tell me. It didn't hold as much weight as when white people would say, wow, you know, you're not Black, you're different, you know. They treat me so much differently whenever I'd go into a store, because in South Africa, we have a huge issue of like sexual violence. Every like 1 in 2 Black South African woman that you meet has been raped. Basically, whenever I went out, it was a very weird experience, because I would go out and suddenly, because people didn't know that I wasn't Black South African, that I wasn't Zulu, they assumed that I was. And men would harass me, they would do all kinds of things to me. And there was one instance, I was in a grocery store whenever I got separated from my adoptive grandmother and I was alone. A man came, he started groping me and started touching me and started, I don't know, saying stuff to me in Zulu. Suddenly, out of the corner, this morbidly obese white woman started yelling at him. His face, he was so... I've never seen a man sort of transform from essentially about to like rape a girl in the corner of a store to suddenly like, I have never seen somebody just like shrivel up like a prune. And she chased him all around the store. She was just chasing him, like going after him. This morbidly obese like grandmother, essentially, okay, like this morbidly obese like 55-year-old woman chasing this man, like bringing the wrath of God onto him. And she eventually he had to stop, because even to this day in South Africa, there is this idea, even among like the most traditional black people, that white people are superior, or that they are above, especially with like lower class black South Africans. And she completely, I mean, she went for him. She destroyed him. Like, she was essentially like, she was throwing things at him. She was yelling at him. She was furious, fuming. And, you know, at the time, like, I was really young. Being groped, being like assaulted by men wasn't something that was new to me. So I didn't like care that much. It was like, close my eyes and just pray. When it happened in cases when I was with somebody who was white, with a parent figure who was white, it was so different, and I'd be treated so differently. And it was so interesting, like now thinking about it, when that happened, it was crazy, like the racial politics in that. If she'd been like a black woman, it would have been really different, like completely different. He would not have been afraid, he would not have been humiliated, he would have kept doing what he was doing. And in those situations, it made me really realize the power of being white in South Africa and the power of being associated with whiteness. Because suddenly, as soon as she started yelling at him and was yelling at him like, that is my child, that is my, well, I wasn't like her child, but she called me her child, like when she was yelling at him, like, that is my child. As soon as he was so confused, didn't know what was going on, no one knew what was going on. But then she made it clear to him that like, you touched like what is mine, like you were doing that to what was mine. It just completely changed. And suddenly this individual completely like morphed into something else. And whenever we go and shopping there again, I had no problems. He wouldn't come near me, wouldn't touch me, like nothing. It was like I had such power. It was crazy. I think when it comes to like microaggressions against my own race, yeah, definitely did, especially growing up. And I think it primarily had to do with the context of South Africa in that sense, but also because my interactions with black South Africans, they either involved assault from older black South African men, because I was a young black woman. I would be sent to run and get groceries because my non-black people looking after me, the non-black people looking after me wouldn't realize that if they sent their white daughters into the store alone, nobody would go near them because they were white. And because, you know, white power, the police on their side, everything, what have you, nobody would even think of touching a white girl. And because they saw me as essentially being like white like them and a part of them, they'd happily send me in. And I would go into these stores, I would go around town, I would walk down the street. I would have this mindset of literally being like invincible in this white person. And then this group of black guys would come out and like, yeah. Now looking back on everything, it was just so naive of everybody in those situations, and so bad in being colorblind, because other black girls my age, their parents would not let them go out alone. Their parents would not let them go out during the day. Their parents would not send them out to do things. It became obvious to me that there was something really amiss, especially when I left South Africa and came to the UK, and suddenly I could actually like go places and men wouldn't harass me, wouldn't do things to me. It was like, wait, what? it was insane. Like, it was absolutely wild. I think a lot of my microaggressions come from those experiences and those encounters. Encounters that I had with Black South African men, which were typically always sexual and negative and involved some form of the least extreme to the most extreme assault, or it would be Black women who typically didn't like me, especially older Black women, because they saw how fucked up the situation was in terms of basic decorum around respecting your elders. The idea that Black children served Black elders and respected them. And so it was really weird when I was like a little Black girl sitting at a table with white people, and then an older Black woman who was a maid would have to serve me food. That didn't make sense to her and to the culture. That was an issue.
Made me more and more hate my appearance and not think that I was attractive. I guess with being insecure with that, it's almost like, yeah, that internalized racism and like self-hatred that happens. So that's why I am on this side as well.
Oh, can I add one thing to that?
Yeah.
Like totally resonant with what both of you guys were saying. I was always proud to be Asian. I was proud of my differences. But I think it was always interesting reckoning with this idea of being proximal to whiteness. And what I mean by that is when white people growing up said, oh, like you're basically white, they were saying that to validate me as being like a first-class citizen because I'm like almost white because I was raised in a white family. And then when Asians would call me a banana, or when Asians would say, oh, well, you're not really Asian, that would hurt on a different level.
Yeah, I would get that too.
Because, of course, we are Asian.
Yeah, 1000%. Yeah, exactly. Exactly that. Yeah. When white people say, oh, you're not Black, it's like to validate you. It's like a compliment. And then when Black people say, you're not Black, it's not a compliment.
Yeah, I didn't have anyone to relate to. All my family comes from a really small town in the Midwest, like 95% white, and to the point where like the KKK, it used to be a sundown town, like that kind of thing. And so, yeah, growing up, it just went from, I was just kind of there as Michaela, but not a Black person. It was more of just like, they would always say to me is like, I don't see you as Black. I just,
100%.
Yeah, you know.
All
And
the other time. And I was happy. I was glad.
Yeah.
I was like, yes, I'm not gonna like be a victim of racism. Like,
yeah.
Yes.
At the time,
One of them.
Exactly. Yeah. It never bothered me at the time, but I think the more I processed it, the older I got, I realized how damaging that term is, because I mean, I think we've all experienced this of like, who am I? And so then I was like, okay, if my family doesn't see me as Black, what am I? You know, that was like the question that I still sometimes think today even, that's like always in the back of my head.
Yeah, I resonate with that. But I also have this problem. I also do have this problem. This is going to be controversial, so, you know, grab your kids, okay? I've had this problem online recently when I've been talking to people who are political activists, like social justice warriors, and I'll be talking to them. They're just really horrible people, like just really like rude, angry, just hostile, calling me names, calling me all kinds of slurs. But it's okay because it's in the name of social justice and in the name of protecting some group of people. And so they can be essentially bullies, and it's fine. Even though I'm not bullying them. I'm trying to be, you know, nice and cordial to them. I'm seen as the bad person just because I don't subscribe to their politics or the way that they do their politics, if you see what I mean. It's like a losing battle. I feel like Sisyphus just rolling a boulder up a hill. And at some point, I'm just going to ditch the hill and I'm going to go and get a beer, because what's the point?
Nature is stronger than nurture. 3, 2, 1, go.
My biological family to go to college. You know, thank you, just got accepted to a UC.
Yo,
Crazy.
congrats.
Thank you. It's never too late to get an education, but you know, like I'm on that path trying to make a better life for myself.
Yeah.
Being a criminologist, nature versus nurture is one of the biggest dilemmas. And after almost 10 years studying, I'm here because I see that environment affects people tremendously. Whether you're still with your biological parents, whether you're adopted, foster care, it doesn't matter. For example, crime or criminality can be developed by your environment. If you grew up in like white suburbia, white picket fence, a lot of money, or if you grew up in a family where everybody is gang related, who has more chance of developing criminality, right? And it's not necessarily who your parents are or your bloodline. So that's why I'm
who
here.
You surround yourself with.
I don't think that there is as great a binary between nature and nurture. I think that they just intermingle, intermesh, mix together like two different colored Play-Dohs or slimes that you just squish together and you mix. And some of the color mixes together and makes a disgusting little brown color, or some of it just stays all separate, but then it's all like connected and it's all together in one big blob. And you can't really tell whether it's separate or the same. You can't tell. And I think that is the essence of what it is to be human in society. I think it is just inevitably going to be one of those unanswered things that we have to appreciate are just a weird amalgamation of two things that are seemingly separate and different, that affect different individuals in different ways, depending on not just the environment in which people are in, but also the specifics and the specificities of each individual and each person. It's a difficult question to answer. I do feel that it's just very intermeshed, the nurture and the nature, and that it's a tricky one to navigate. It is tricky, but let me know what you think. I'd be interested because I'm not sure. But anyway, this was an interesting video. This was a really interesting video. I highly recommend that you go and you watch the whole video because it is actually really interesting. It's actually really, really fascinating stuff. But yeah, I think I have thought about this a bit too long. I'm going to go and cleanse by continuing to write a script for my next video because at least that's not so personal and so close to home. I'd love to hear what you think about this and also about how you feel, whether you are adopted or not, about your upbringing and how it has influenced you, how it's impacted you. I'd be absolutely fascinated to hear about how your upbringing has impacted your life now, whether it has, whether you are letting it, or how you are trying to stop it from influencing you, or whether it is influencing you in a positive way and you are utilizing that. Thank you so much for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. I am trying to reach 150k subscribers by the end of the year. That is my dream. And so I'd also like the algorithm to be my friend again. So please do engage in the comment section. It would be much appreciated. I'll see you all very soon in the next video. Thank you to my patrons, and yes, stay safe.